Good morning, Kyra, all the way from Queensland, Australia. You're speaking with Peter Walkden from Walkden Entertainment. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Very good. I like your shirt. I'm also in that fact.
Oh, thank you.
We're all representing Chucky. Uh, this,
Yes.
this is a really exciting documentary to talk about. Living with Chucky is coming to Australia digitally on the 26th of April, also available in New Zealand. And you serve as a director and a writer of this film, which is just very exciting. And, we understand instantly with this documentary that you are a fan of Chucky. And I was sort of curious to question, at what age did you first watch a Chucky movie or a Child's Play film? What age did you first encounter Chucky?
I didn't know what it was at the time and I had nightmares about it, but I actually caught the end of Bride of Chucky as like a 4-year-old. I didn't know that it was Bride of Chucky literally until COVID. I figured out what it was. But yeah, so that actually technically was my first experience to it because my parents were, I think my dad was watching it as a reference for doing Seed of Chucky.
Yes.
And my parents told me like I couldn't watch what they were watching. And of course I snuck downstairs anyways. And karma was immediate because I had nightmares for several months.
I bet. Oh my goodness, it would have been terrifying. I would have freaked out and never slept. And when it comes to this documentary, we do know that it is about Child's Play, the films. We know it's about Chucky. There's a lot of trivia here. There's a lot of, educational factors, but there's also a lot of heart to this documentary, which I really loved. It was very surprising. And I was sort of curious to question, did you always set out to make the documentary that way? Or was it always just about Chucky? And then you thought, oh, I could put a bit of heart into this as well. Like, what was the original plan here?
The plan was the heart first and then the retrospect aspect came afterwards because I knew that that was a big like subject I wanted to tackle, but then I was like, well, we have to talk about the movies in order to talk about what it was like working on the movies and how we felt about it.
Yep.
So I guess I'll just work backwards and do a retrospect too.
Yeah, beautiful. And it amazes me to this present day that Chucky is still in our lives. I mean, I've got a Australian Blu-ray with me today. This is the Australian release. It's actually recent re-release. The film was 1988, as you know. You can still buy the t-shirts, you can still buy the films, and we've still got a TV series that continues on. Chucky is still present in our lives in 2023. Does it ever amaze you? And I was sort of curious to question, why do you think Chucky is still here in our presence?
Um, it does amaze me because it's like he's been around longer than I've existed on this planet, which is kind of crazy. Um, I mean, there's same thing with like clowns. There's something about humans being also scared of dolls. And like something that should be really innocent and comforting to a child being evil and murderous is such an interesting thing, but also it is different from other horror icons like Michael Myers or Jason because it's not a 6-foot man in a mask. It's a doll that's 3 feet tall. And I think that's kind of what keeps audiences interested because it's like, what next could this little doll do? How far can you go with it? And there's obviously it's been pushed in every which way direction, and he's had a wife and now a child. So probably because he's an underdog in his own way.
Yeah, tremendous. I love that answer. And when it comes to this documentary, tell me a little bit more about it. How long did it take you from start to finish to make the film?
If we're counting all the years, probably like 5. I did the short film of this when I was in college and I was a sophomore. So keep in mind 2 years of like expanding it. I was actually I still had school and I like occasionally could do an interview. And then when I moved to LA after I graduated, I like dove into it after I kind of got settled, but then COVID hit literally the next year. So it's been several years in the making.
Yeah, and that was actually my next question. It may be COVID here, but I was going to say, what was your biggest challenge or the hurdle you had while making the film? Was it COVID or was there a bigger challenge in front of you?
Oh goodness. COVID was definitely, well, COVID really messed up. Like people stopped financing and funding indie films Like the indie market completely crashed because people needed their money or their savings, and then the stock market and all those things. So like I would have people be like, yeah, we can invest, and then COVID hit and they're like, just kidding. Or like the stock market would be changing, and so they're like, I can't take my money out anymore. And that was really rough. Or, you know, reaching out to, I had the dilemma as a filmmaker as well of some of these interviews are back from when I was in college, and got those interviews, and I could have went back and refilmed it all on a nicer camera and things like that, but I didn't think I would get those same candid interviews twice.
Yes.
And there was like no way to recreate it, and it'd be really weird to cut to an interview like several years later, and then we have to explain that. And also with COVID, like Brad Dourif is like in his 70s. I would never like put him at risk for getting COVID over something like this. But honestly, the biggest challenge was the legalities of it all, because Chucky's a huge IP with Universal. I had like and MGM, because they two people own it, and I like was led astray by a producer who like convinced me I couldn't get an attorney to get it cleared and things like that. And yeah, and so I actually went down the wrong path for like 9-10 months with this person, because they were more experienced in the film industry and documentary filmmaking, and it was completely not true. And who ended up saving the day was freaking Heather Langenkamp from Nightmare on Elm Street. I met her at a wedding, and she gave me the phone number to her lawyer who cleared her documentary, I Am Nancy.
Oh, of course, yes.
Yeah.
Get out of here. I'm glad you did not give up. I'm glad you took the fight head on and made this great film. And you did touch on briefly just then about these interviews. There's a lot of people in this documentary. There's a lot of talent, a lot of cast, a lot of crew, you know, directors, producers, you name it. They're in this film. You know, I could spend all day just listing them off. It's tremendous, and kudos to you, because I thought with all these interviews you've had to edit and splice, you know, keep it all on point and on key. You did that really, really well, in my opinion. And I just was sort of curious to know, how did you find editing all of these, you know, interviews and talent? How did you find putting it all into one film? Did you find it, you know, a challenging process there as well, or?
That took so long. I could still be editing it, is the truth of the matter. Like looking at it, I'm like, oh, I could have done this for another year or year and a half editing it. But like I had already spent so much time with this film. I see some people being like, Gardner should have gotten another editor on the project. And I'm like, okay, if I could pay for one, like absolutely agreed, but I had no money, which is why I edited it anyways. So that was also really hard, because I opted out of editing a thesis my senior year of college because I hate editing. And then I was like, cool, I guess I'll just edit a feature documentary, which is even harder than narrative. If you like walk into my room, especially when I was editing, I look like a mad woman. It's basically transcribing everybody's interviews on paper, printing it out, and then I had a color coding system, and then like marks of where one color could go to the next in the same sentence, and then I just like had to try and figure it out. It was a beast to edit and make it flow, because also sometimes people are saying stuff that like nobody's saying stuff that's really gonna go right next to somebody else's, so you're really searching or splicing two sentences together. It's a monster.
Well, I appreciated the work you did with that, because I was watching all these interviews and I thought, my goodness, you've actually trimmed them in a way that we are on topic with all these different edits. And I can only imagine, given the talent, it would have been challenging. So thank you for doing that. I thought it was really good. Let's press the rewind button on our VHS player and talk about your upbringing really briefly. You've got a parent that's in the film industry, Tony. We love Tony here in Australia as well. And I was sort of curious, you know, with having a parent in the film industry, you know, how did that influence your future in filmmaking? Was it a big part, or did it sort of plant any sort of seeds?
Originally, no, except they were there all along. I just didn't realize it. Because my dad works in special effects makeup. So even when I was going to set and things like that, I was really only paying attention to the makeup side of things and in the makeup trailer a lot of the time. And although I love SFX makeup and it's a big hobby of mine and I love it, I didn't see myself as passionate about it as I see my dad is. And I'm like, I don't know if that would make me happy for the rest of my life, is just doing this. And so I actually wanted to be a nurse for the longest time because I was desensitized to blood and guts and all those things. And then my parents encouraged me to take a filmmaking class because I was more creative and things like that. And that class showed you all the different types of film, like pieces of filmmaking. And I directed my first short and I fell in love and I was like, you can get paid to do this? Like, that's crazy. And so then my dad's influence kind of came in because I realized I can direct what my dad does. Like, I want to direct horror movies or things with heavy practical effects because I've seen so many people not like be kind to SFX artists on set, give them enough time or resources to make their work shine. And also, like, they don't get enough credit in the industry themselves. Like, they're not interviewed on red carpets or anything like that. And it's hilarious because it's like movies like, I don't know, like Zombieland wouldn't exist without the zombies.
Totally. 100%.
Exactly.
I agree with you. There's definitely a deserving of more recognition for the hard work and the effort and the talent and the gifting and ability. I'm with you. We're totally with you. That's why I said we love Tony in Australia. So, you know, shout out to Tony, even though he's not here at the moment, you know, with our interview, but we do love Tony as well as yourself. And in Australia, we've actually got people, you know, like yourself. They're trying to make a documentary. They're trying to get their first feature documentary off the ground. You've done it. You've done a wonderful job with your first documentary that's coming to Australia soon. I was sort of curious the question, just to throw it in as we come to a bit of an end. What advice could you give someone in Australia that's currently trying to make their first one? You've been there, you've done it, you've succeeded. What's the sort of advice you can give out there?
Oh, goodness. If you're making a documentary that has clips from movies or music videos or things like that, fair use attorneys exist. Yes. You can find one. Go look at your favorite documentaries, look at the budget they had, and then find what lawyer they used and try and get in contact with it. People will come down on rates if they like your story and what you're trying to do. And then obviously, like, whatever cameras you can use is fine. Just make sure that it's consistent or you have a really good color gradist, because I had like 5 different types of cameras I used. You can tell, but at least coloring like saved us a little bit. And then honestly, even as somebody who's in the, like, I have a dad in the film industry, it was really hard for me to find distribution anyhow. Like, I had a lot of connections to horror people, but it's really different when it's people in makeup versus selling and distributing. So if you want to go the film festival circuit, I would recommend it. And hopefully that way you can find sales agents, because in my own experience, nobody was biting until I had an actual sales agent like attached with it and like could get me in the room places.
Beautiful. Stunning advice. You're not going to hear that anywhere else. So that was really good. Thank you. And my final question, this makes me sad now because we're coming to a close. I want to give you the floor. We've got a couple of minutes remaining, but if I said to you, you know, that this film's coming out, Living with Chucky, you know, April 26th, Australia and New Zealand, only available on digital. Why should the people of Australia and New Zealand take out their time and check out this documentary? The floor is yours for the next 30 seconds. Why should they check out this film? Go.
Okay, if you are not a Chucky fan and you're new to it, this might make you a Chucky fan and interested in watching those films if you didn't have a desire prior. If you're an older Chucky fan coming in, this documentary touches in ways that we haven't before, and any behind the scenes interviews. Also, there's never before seen behind the scenes footage that I found in a trunk from my dad. So there's a lot of new things to see, as well as everything all in one place. If you're wanting to learn about something like this or the horror community or the genre, you could go watch a bajillion interviews online, or you could find it all in one place here with Living with Chucky.
Tremendous. You've heard it from the director and writer herself. It is wonderful to meet you, Kyra. Thank you so much for your time. I know you've got a busy day ahead with a few interviews for Australia, but like I said, it's been a real honor. I'm very excited about this film, and we are cheering this film on with you here in Australia and New Zealand.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Hopefully we'll talk again in the future.